Grenade by Alan Gratz, Part 2, pages 165 through 169. Fading away. Hideki heard Private Medea yell out behind him, but he didn't slow down to look back. Once he was outside the cave, he zigzagged this way and that for the cover of a low hill in the distance. It was cloudy and rainy, but it was daylight out now, and the water and the light in his eyes blinded him. His heart pounded like a hammer as he slipped and slid, juggling the grenade, the pack, and the rifle. The cigarette had already been drowned in the rain, and he let it fall into the mud. Hideki ran and ran, but unlike the Kichimana that chased Hideki in his dreams, Private Medea didn't follow him. At the edge of the steep ridge, Hideki flung the private's rifle down into the ravine where it sank into the mud with a splurch. He never once considered keeping it. Just carrying a rifle was dangerous. People with rifles shot at other people with rifles, and he didn't know how to use the thing anyway. Yoshio and the old woman and the other Okinawans in the cave might still not be safe, but at least now they couldn't be shot at by Private Medea. Hideki kept running. When his lungs gave out, he collapsed underneath the remains of an exploded American tank. He panted heavily, his body still weak from days with too little food and too little sleep, his head still ringing. He stuffed the unused grenade back in his pocket. How many other brushes with death would it help him escape from? Hideki wanted to go on, to look for Kimiko, but he felt himself fading. He was crashing from the adrenaline rush of his standoff with Private Medea, from running away. His escape had used up the last of his energy, and his sick, feverish body was giving up. If he didn't eat some food today, real food, he was going to die. It was time to try the food in Ray's backpack. Hideki tried one of the hard, unwrapped crackers first. It was tough to bite off, and it tasted like wood shavings, but Hideki was able to gulp it down. He wanted to wait, to see if the cracker was poisoned and would make him sick, but his hunger got the better of him. He bit off more and more, swallowing the dry bits of cracker as fast as he could choke them down. The second, third, and fourth crackers quickly followed the first. If they were poison, he was at least going to die with a full belly. The can with the key might have food in it too. Better food than the crackers. But what if it was some kind of an explosive device instead that would blow up in Hideki's face? Surely he'd eaten enough crackers to buy him another couple of days. But his body still shook with hunger and the anticipation of what might be inside the can. He would try it. He had to. Eyes closed, head turned, Hideki snapped the key in the can's lid and cranked it back. The smell that rose from the can made his mouth water. It wasn't an explosive device. It was potatoes and beef. Real meat. In a daze, Hideki used the fork from the meal kit to spear a piece of beef. His hand shook as he lifted the morsel to his mouth, afraid he would drop it, afraid it might somehow go away or be taken from him at the last moment. He placed a mouthful on his tongue and closed his eyes. It tasted overwhelmingly of salt, but underneath it was the fatty, rich flavor of beef, something Hideki hadn't tasted since long before the battle began. Hideki chewed the meat slowly and fought his stomach's powerful urge to swallow it down quickly. Hideki's eyes watered at the sheer joy of it, and he cried softly. The food was so good, and it had taken him so long to eat it. He might even have lost the pack before he'd tried it, and the food hadn't been poisoned after all. It took all the willpower he had, but Hideki saved the rest for later. He would need it. His stomach still yawned, begging for more food, but he had bought himself more time. He felt solid again, less like a ghost. He repacked Ray's bag, took off his clammy, wet jacket, and put both of them under his head for a pillow. His head still pounded, and he needed to close his eyes, to rest. In seconds, Hideki was asleep. He twisted and turned, his body still blazing with fever and shaking with hunger, and as he slept, he dreamed. He was being chased by a Kichimana again. The Kichimana hurled pine cones at him that exploded like grenades, cratering the ground to Hideki's left and right. Hideki ran and ran through rice paddies and around trees, up hills and over streams. But every time he turned to look over his shoulder, the Kichimana was right there behind him, cackling and hurling more pinecone grenades at him. Boom, 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 boom. The evil sprite was chasing him toward the pine tree again, toward Ray, but this time the Kijimana caught him first. It leaped onto his back and sank its long, sharp fangs into his neck, and Hideki jerked awake. He blinked in confusion. Hideki wasn't where he had gone to sleep. The blown up tank, the muddy field, the pouring rain, they were all gone. He lay instead on a cot under a green army tent, a green American army tent. Hideki had been captured by the enemy.